Namaskar. Welcome to this session. We are considering Pratyahara, and therein we have to commence understanding the physiological perspective of Pratyahara that yoga technology has taken into consideration. Otherwise, Pratyahara seems to be mental discipline and mental process, but yoga has taken into consideration the physiological dimension, which can contribute mightily for Pratyahara, and it is a very mighty contribution. There is that Sharira sanstha, and there are organs in Sharira sanstha. So there are physiological organs. If we understand the anatomy of human embodiment, we see that there are several organs of several systems of the body. So, considering these organs, considering the functions of these organs, considering the process of these organs, and just now we considered that these are all indriyas, sharirendriyas. Now, since Pratyahara has something to do with indriyas, it is not only gnanendriyas as repeatedly said, it is not only gnanendriyas and karmendriyas but also manasendriyas and sharirendriyas. And we have seen the five forms of each indriya, that is each organ of the entire systemic body, and not merely cognitive organs. Then there is also what is called as neurological system, supporting the human embodiment and anatomy. One can easily understand the relationship between the nervous system and human mind, psyche, consciousness. Then in physiology you also come across certain glands called ductless glands or endocrine glands. So there is endocrine system in our embodiment, in the physiology of it. So these glands are also tremendous mind psyche conditioners. Now, people of our generation need no explanation here as to how the nervous system is behind the mind, how the glandular system is behind the mind. And if they all function well and proper, it is one thing. But if they malfunction, we know that it is not only the body in disorder, but the mind too is in disorder. So, yoga understands, the technology of yoga understands that the food of all these organs of entire systemic body, psychophysical system of human embodiment, needs Aahara, needs intakes and inputs. So yoga considers the food of all these organs, be those cognitive organs, mental organs and physiological organs. And Pratyahara, Aahara of Pratyahara, has to consider this aspect, the Aahara of entire organic system. Then, in the brain, we also come to know with modern science that there are centers of senses. Needless to say how much the senses work on our mind, how much the senses can influence our mind. So behind the senses in the brain we have something called as sensory cortex, and each of the sense organ, Jnanendriya, cognitive organ, has something in the cortex called sensory cortex of the brain. So we are aware of the sensory cortex and motor cortex. The stimulations and the functions of senses and motor organs, cognitive organs and cognitive organs, is regulated by these centers in the brain, in the cortex, which has sensory cortex and motor cortex. So yoga also considers circumscribing the cerebral cortical parts in its technology and avail of it, their contribution for Pratyahara and onward aspects of Ashtanga Yoga as well as the whole of Ashtanga Yoga. Even the Yamas and Niyamas, which are wrongly construed as moral ethical principles and hygienic principles, we can understand that the infrastructure of all these morality and ethicality are in the brain. So the brain needs to be cultured, the brain needs to be handled, and for modern science it is in autonomous system. The brain is autonomous in function and it is not in our hands, but yoga has access to handle the involuntary system within human embodiment, and the brain is a very important part of involuntary system within us, and therefore with particular reference to Pratyahara, it can be said that yoga technology avails of the contribution of these infrastructural aspects in the brain, which are in the sensory cortex, motor cortex, cerebral parts, and therefore from very embodiment, human embodiment, yoga technology can help one tap the resources available in the brain and brawn system, or the entire anatomy, physiology, neurology, endocrinology, which are all aspects which tell us that they have tremendous impact over what we are now considering Pratyahara. And these aspects are handled and the grasp is had, access is had through the technology that is behind, very sound technology that is behind yogasanas, pranayam, kriyas, mudras, bandhas, etc. So just as we know that certain psychedelic drugs or accesses can really influence the brain. So there are neuroengineering aspects and chemical processes through which the brain can be accessed, and the psychological and mental manifestations can be changed by accessing the brain, which modern science knows very well, modern people know very well, and that's why we are aware of certain psychiatric drugs and psychedelic drugs. psychiatric stimulations and psychedelic stimulations. So chemical changes can be influenced and necessary change in the state of the brain can be brought about. Similarly, the yoga tantra, technology of yoga, does something which is pratyaharopayogi, that is conducive to pratyahara, complementary to pratyahara, and it avails of that, those things, and the pratyahara can be structured with the assistance of the very brain, cerebral cortical parts, lobes of the brain, parts of the brain, neurology of the brain, electrochemical stimulation of the brain. So that can be handled with yogasana, pranayam, kriyas, mudras, bandhas, etc. and all the aspects of yoga technology. So the brain is chemically modified and therefore the physiology is also biochemically modified. So electrochemical changes, then the biochemical changes and chemical changes can be influenced by yoga technology. The technology is sound enough and potent enough to be doing that. The internal secretions which take place in the body can be also suitably handled and modified to bloom and blossom pratyahara, and then even dharana, dhyan, samadhi, and even Yama and Niyamas. So as the layman thinks that Yama and Niyamas are moral ethical principles, in yoga technology, the practitioners of yoga, the yogis, they take advantage of the accesses given by the technology and make necessary chemical changes, biochemical changes, electrochemical changes, whereby there is a facility to be practicing ahimsa, etc., yamas, and the shaucha, etc., niyamas, even on a very deeper plane. These are not cosmetic practices. So the brain mapping has been done by yoga suitably for its pursuit. The brain, the parts of the brain, the lobes of the brain, the system of the brain, the organs of the brain, they all contribute significantly for pratyahara, and pratyahara comes about quite astonishingly. In modern science, it is postulated that the mind, psyche, consciousness, emotions, behavior, conduct, human activities, human responses, human reactions, for all these things, the brain has a very centric place. Human activities to human reactivities, human responses to human participations. The brain is so important to devise these dynamics of actions, responses, reactions, etc. So, if the brain is intact, most of our things are intact. And we know if the brain is in disarray, everything is in disarray. So we understand today how much the brain has a very centric place in conduct of our and conduction of our body, our physiological process, psychological process, mental process, intellectual process, emotional process, psychic process, activities and responses and reactions. We know how much the brain is important. So, this was known to yoga from time immemorial, and therefore yoga technology was devolved from time without beginning. So today modern science speaks about brain and says the brain has a centric place in the human manifestation. Yoga identifies that. Additionally, yoga also identifies the heart has similarly a very centric place. And when Oriental thought system speaks about heart, it is not only coronary heart but also the esoteric aspects of the heart, or what is also called as spiritual heart. So when we say hearty congratulations, hearty condolences, hearty bereavement, etc., which is that heart? It is not coronary heart. It is locus of the mind. We refer to locus of the mind in the heart, which has unique functions than the mind which has locus in the brain. So we can understand that there is a locus of mind in the heart, as there is also locus of the mind in the brain. And therefore, the yoga technology also considers the heart. And if I may say so, carries out a neurological study of the heart, psychomental study of the heart, and this is not just the coronary heart again. Let me repeat that. So that heart is also investigated, understood, explored, mapped. Its processes are understood, and therefore its processes too are used. The Yoga Shastra, the Adhyatma, the Paramartha, the mysticism, they all give a lot of importance to Hrudayam. And the Upanishads beautifully delineate on this heart. I recall a mantra from Brihadaranyaka Upanishad 3.9.20. Hrudaye yeva rupani pratisthitani bhavanti. Now, to understand what exactly the Upanishad means, one needs to be familiar with Vedanta Prakriya. One must be sufficiently oriented to Vedanta Shastra. So when Vedanta Shastra Gamanam, one who really dwells into Vedanta Shastra would understand enormous purport in what Upanishads mention. It can be mentioned, and it's worth mentioning, there is also Upanishad called Hrudayo Upanishad. And there is also a passage which comes in Brihadaranyaka Upanishad called Hridaya Brahmanam. A beautiful set of mantras in Hridaya Brahmanam of Brihadaranyaka Upanishad. Of course, in Brihadaranyaka Upanishad, you also have some Vedic statements which are called Brahmana Vakyas, because it is part of Shatapada Brahmanam. There are mantras, there are Prozac passages as well. The point is, there is also Hridaya Brahmanam, and at some stage one must take a look into it. The Hridaya is spoken of in the esoteric aspects as a Nadi Moolam. Heart that Vedanta speaks about or Yoga speaks about, that heart is also locus of nadis, and it is said that 101 nadis originate from heart. Out of the 101 nadis, one nadi is branchless, and 100 nadis have branches 72,000 each. That's the enormous nadi network that you have in Hridayam. So when the heart is evolved, we know figuratively person is evolved. And therefore, yoga works on this locus of mind, psyche, consciousness, which is the heart, apart from working on the other locus, which is the brain. It is worthwhile mentioning in the esoteric mapping of body as carried out in Yoga Shastra, the spine has very important position as locus of consciousness, locus of mind, psyche. Otherwise, it may be said that the brain comes in solar, the lunar energy locus, and the heart comes in solar energy locus. If it is to be interpreted on the lines of two energies which Adhyatma speaks about, solar energy, lunar energy. Modern science also speaks about solar plexus and lunar plexus. The solar plexus are above the belly and below the thorax. So it is, you can understand the heart region is proximal to it, and the lunar plexus is throat and above. And you can understand how the brain comes under that lunar force in energy forms, and the heart comes under solar energy. But there is third one, that is spine. Enormous importance is given to spine, and there is incredible, astonishing spine mapping done by yoga technology, and it understands the import of the spine and the back. Enormous potentials to evolve the consciousness, which is of course not in the influence of solar and lunar, and that's why it is esoteric. The Yoga Shastra also speaks about, in esoteric aspects of embodiment, in the mapping of esoteric anatomy, there is mention of Granthi Traya, Vishnu Granthi, Brahma Granthi and Rudra Granthi. Granthi means it is like knotty junction, knots. And the modern science has just begun to speak about those. So these three Granthis, Brahma Granthi is in the lower parts of our trunk, and the Vishnu Granthi comes in the chest region, and Rudra Granthi in the brain region. In different agamas, these places are differently given nomenclature. So in Tantras, where Vishnu Granthi is, where Rudra Granthi is, where Brahma Granthi is might change. But generally the thing is that there are three Granthis. To speak in terms of psychology and human mentology, mindology, these are three zones. One is passion zone. This passion zone is in the part below the navel. Emotional zone is in the region of the heart. And the ego zone is in the brain. And we have knots in all these centers in the zones. So passion knots are there, emotional knots are there, and ego knots are there. Identity knots are there, emotional knots are there, and passion knots are there. And this makes the human mind complex. And that is why the human mind is as it is characterized. The most unpredictable psyche in the world. All other creatures have predictable psyche. You will be able to predict how a lion and tiger and cat and dog and eagle and sparrow and ant and insect and worm will react. But it is difficult to envisage and anticipate how human being will react. It is because these knotty junctions, knots of the I-ness, knots of emotions, knots of passion. So there is reference to these granthis for which the modern anatomy doesn't speak about, but it certainly has some notion and idea about passion zone, emotional zone, and ego intellectual zone, thought zone, sentimental zone, and tendency zone, passion zone. So passion zone is in the bottom of the trunk, middle of the trunk you have emotional zone, and above the trunk in the brain you have the identity zone. And this is so important to be handling in Pratyahara, which modern man can understand. You cannot say that the passion zone is not tuned and fine-tuned, and you are able to get Pratyahara. Nor can you say that the emotional zone is in desire and you are getting Pratyahara, or the identity zone is totally in desire and you are having Pratyahara. We can easily understand how the zones need to be set right. They should be tuned. For Pratyahara or any aspect of yoga, from yamas to samadhis, ahimsa to samadhi. So, the mentions of nadi and nadi moolam. There are nadis which emanate from, as you just now heard, from heart. There is another nadi junction which is navel, and there is another nadi junction which is brain, and you can now correlate. Nabhi means vasana chakra, vasana zone. Then the heart region means emotional zone, and the brain region means identity zone. And esoteric anatomy of Adhyatma also identifies these as nadi moola. Many nadis emanate from these zones. Nadi moola is also to be traced in study of consciousness in yoga in Shat chakras. Mooladhara chakra, it is a nadi moola. Swadhisthana chakra, another nadi moola. Manipuraka chakra, another nadi moola. Anahata chakra, another nadi moola. Vishuddhi chakra, another nadi moola. Agnya chakra, another nadi moola. So 6 chakras are again junction of nadis. They are hubs of nadis. Many nadis come out from these hubs of nadis. The granthis, Brahma Granthi, Vishnu Granthi, Ruddra Granthi are again hub. There are three hubs of nadis. And therefore, in the human anatomy, the exoteric, the esoteric, the pratyahara can be developed by handling them, accessing them, managing them. So, understand this aspect of anatomy, and then the glands, endocrine system. We can understand how much the glands work on human mind. Any disorder in the mind, more often there is disorder in the endocrine system. So there are glands spoken of as ductless glands or the endocrine glands in modern anatomy. So the technology of asana, pranayam, kriya, mudra, bandha, etc., they work on these locus of mind, psyche, consciousness, which are the glands of the endocrine system, which are nadi mula, and all those nadi mula which I just now listed, 6 of the spine, and then the Hridaya, the Nabhi and the brain, and then Brahma Granthi, Vishnu Granthi, Ruddra Granthi. So also the organs of the anatomy, they are chemical processors, they have chemical properties, they have chemical profiles. There is a difference between the chemical profile of gallbladder and urinary bladder. There is a difference between the chemical profile of liver, stomach, colon, spleen, pancreas, intestines, bladder, heart, lungs. So all these organs of the anatomy have different chemical profiles, they have different chemical processes, there are different chemical turnouts. They all are secreting chemicals. All these organs are secreting chemicals, and therefore their function is so important. Now you will understand how Pratyahara has at contraposition the thirst and hunger impulse, Shuddha Trushna. What Pratyahara is possible when the Shuddha Trushna is rampant, the thirst and hunger having their cacophony. What chance of Pratyahara is there? They are major antagonizers of Pratyahara. Pratyahara Pratipakshi. And now they can really completely detonate your Pratyaharic endeavors by their if they are hovering in your mind, thirst and hunger, then you can imagine how Pratyahara is beyond even imagination. So it is important that something needs to be done to manage the thirst impulse and hunger impulse. And esoteric anatomy of yoga tells us that this is possible, and this is in the Kantakupa. In the 3rd chapter of Yoga Sutras, you will get a sutra called Kantakupe Kshut Pipasa Nivrittihi. Now, if the Kshut Pipasa Nivritti has taken place, Pratyahara is quite at the fingertips. Now, where is this Kantakupa? You will get easy reference to this Kantakupa and its functioning for thirst and hunger, because thyroids and parathyroids are in this location, and we know how they work on our metabolism, and therefore our hunger thirst impulse. Anyway, interesting discoveries are there in the science of yoga, technology of yoga. So, attempt was made today to take account of this concept of physiology of Pratyahara, and where we did a kind of mapping of our anatomy to understand how logical and how sound in reason is this precept of yoga. So that is what we did today. And then finally, behind the functioning of the indriyas, all the indriyas, I don't have to repeat, Jnanendriya, Karmendriya, Manasendriya, Sharirendriya. The prana is important factor. Now this prana is unknown to modern science. But prana in yoga is very, very, very centric concept. So I recall a statement that one of the commentators called Nagoji Bhatta, in his Vritti, he says, Indriyanam balam pranam vitesham yatnena nigrahat. Indriyanam balam pranam. The power of the indriyas is in the prana. And therefore, prana management is so important for indriya management. So that is the final statement of the day, that the prana should be managing, or the prana should be managed. Therefore, the prana will be managing indriyas, and if the indriyas are managed, that itself is pratyahara. So, with that, we have taken a view of this particular dimension, physiological dimension, anatomical dimension of Pratyahara, which was intended in the today's session. So we have done that. So that should be enough for the day. Namaskar all of you.